We now have the pleasure of having here Antoni Muntadas in this afternoon roundtable, giving him the welcome and telling him that we have a great pleasure in having him here, even though it's virtually. Well, good afternoon to all. Good afternoon, because there's some places where you are, you might some other time. I'm speaking in Portuguese mixed with Espanol, with Spanish. I hope that it might work, even though we have translators. I'll give you a minimum introduction as to the context. Context is important. In my work, whenever I work in any place, I try to understand or to say, talk about, read, to understand the context in which I am. So for this work, it is fundamental to understand that the presentation in São Paulo is a presentation that is complemented by these roundtables. If the first roundtables, like this morning and the ones that come afterwards, without them, the project cannot be understood because it seems like a colonization of an American model in Latin America. So that's not the idea. It's a model that has to work there. And let's see what works and what doesn't. And the questions that might be had in the project were very clear as to the project being for Latin America. The questions are made for Latin America. So the questions that you might make are the questions that are valid for a possible Latin American project or a Brazilian project, because now we are almost always talking about Brazil. So I want to thank you all, participants, audience, that contributions are important for this project because I say that I like to play tennis. I don't like to play against a wall. You know, I want to play tennis with someone else. So the dialectic possibility of the discussion is fundamental, and I leave you there, and I thank you very much for the contributions that you might make for these round tables. Thank you. Well, I thank our guest, inspiring guest, Antoni Muntadas, and we talked a little before starting this meeting, and he was saying that in Latin America, the important thing for the university is access, he said. And I would like to add that we also have the problem of permanence. When I worked in the Ministry of Education with Lula and Dilma, this is a very important issue because it's not only, there not only were made policies for affirmative action, but we also have a problem of students that have no way of paying their lodging, university lodging, food, buying the books, and can't survive if they don't have any grants. So one of the important initiatives for the expansion of higher studies in Brazil was that. Therefore, when Lula assumed the presidency of the country, we had in the country 3 million university students. And at the end of Dilma's government, there were 8 million, so more than 100% increase in university students, and having gone from 20%, the percentage of youngsters between 20 and 18 and 24 had a number of graduates in 20%, and that would not have been possible if it wasn't for access and permanence, as our guest Antoni Muntadas said. So I'll begin now the event. Thank you again. And the order for speech will be myself as a moderator also. I will speak also. Then Elena Nader, Professor Naomar, and Professor Guilherme Wisnik will have all 20 minutes of speech and then a discussion. What would I like to say? Well, from reading Antoni Muntadas' work and from the assistance to his exhibition, I was very much interested, among many other issues, the relationship between society and university. This relationship is a problem that concerns and interests me, or has interested me for many years, because it is a point of cut, of conflict in the academic world. On one hand, you have those who understand society as corporation. And therefore, with a disposition inside the university to collaborate with corporations. But there are several levels of this. Some are correct, some are not. For example, in the university, you have people that are more conscious that it favors technological advancement, that it militates for innovation. And all these things are important, and but that involves a collaboration with corporations, enterprises. On the other hand, you have people who defend, and I'm talking about defending and the collaboration of society. There is a great absence of society itself. Society is reduced to corporations. I've seen it a lot in the University of São Paulo. The idea that university has to collaborate with corporations, but the society itself does not assume, not even that. In other words, you have for MBA, a course that might train professionals for the workplace is welcome. But a course for the involvement of the landless militants and other labor militants is something that is commented about by Noam Chomsky, by academia, and about academia, Noam Chomsky, and others who seem to be like these aspects. On the other hand, I'm concerned also that the people from the human sciences and social sciences, instead of discussing what does society demand, like a dialogue between university and society, they assume the discourses of equality in corporate society, and they put themselves against, and they are radicalizing. I was in favor, but I understand that the university has to collaborate with society. Yes, operating with society means that you strengthen social movements, among others, strengthen equality. I tried to bring the photograph of the Folha de São Paulo newspaper showing the manifestation of the communities, Jacarezinho slums, and there you can see all of them are, or most of them are, black, to show just how far we are from democracy in Brazil and how much the killings of poor youngsters who are Afro-descendants is an imminence. Society has a way to reduce that and making that become a past. And I'm concerned that in the academic areas of human sciences, there is not always the idea that we should reform that, but they say that we have to strengthen society only. When I was evaluation director from CAPES, we received proposals for graduation courses to be financed by foundations connected to the University of São Paulo. Foundations that are of private law that were created to help the University of São Paulo, but started to offer master's degrees that were paid. By being foundations, they could charge, yes, but the master's degree would have in its diploma such and such foundation connected to the University of São Paulo. And that caused a lot of controversy because through the Constitution of Brazil, public universities cannot charge for regular education. It wouldn't be possible to charge for that course, but somehow this was a trick. It could be a fake, a dirty trick, because the foundations wanted to get money and they used the brand of University of São Paulo to their favor, which is very complicated. So the relationship between university and corporation that should not be inhibited, but should be regulated. It should be inside the framework of the relationship where society is relating with university, and not just corporations. Now, is something that's very curious. It's my life experience also, University of São Paulo experience. In Unifesp, where I was a teacher for 2 years, I didn't see this. I didn't see it in federal universities, which I visited, or that I know. But it is an interesting thing that in the University of Sao Paulo, the great majority of the teachers give classes without wearing a tie. But when we go to the rectors, pro-rectors of the universities, in the federal universities, they have a tie and a coat. They wear that. So from the point of view of the dressing code, and for the university community, it's something odd also. But here we have a very important symbol here. None of us would say that something is only symbolic. We know it's symbolic, but it's a symbolic to remark the difference between the rectorship and the body represented by it. We cannot forget that one of the great controversies of the University of Sao Paulo have been the issue of the choice of the rector that was democratized relatively, but continues to depend on a triple list, not by the order of the government of the state, but by decision of the very University Council of the University of Sao Paulo that wants a triple list. It being so that since the 1980, in all the changing posts of rectors in the 30 successions, in fact, there was only one time when a rector was designed that wasn't the first in the triple list of candidates. It wasn't the most voted by the community. José as a politician of São Paulo. It's something that represents a delicate situation. In my experience with the federal universities, even though some have really had problems in the choosing of their rector, not IEA University, Federal University, they chose Naomar all the time, yes, who's here with us. But in the federal universities, I saw that the participation or maybe the choice of the community, the university community, regarding the choosing of a rector, there was a commitment to the university. So the direction of the university is to be connected with the university. So when you choose, it is a symbolic choice, yes, but it chooses also as to how the rector dresses and how he or she relates to society, and also the commitment between university and society. To conclude, I think it would be important for us to think what are the fundamental agendas that with which the university can contribute for society. Today, it's more than evident, given the world crisis, which is aggravated in Brazil, we have had contributions from the order of health, prevention of the pandemic, and the treatment of the pandemic, and that prevention through vaccination, health barriers and measures for vaccinating. We have educational aspects in all levels. Brazil continues to be lacking in basic education. We have issues of economic power. We have a whole package of issues. These are Brazilian problems, and all these problems were made a consensus of inside the democratically elected governments between 1964 and 94 and 2014. And these consensi that were later broken may continue to represent an important agenda for the academic contribution. I believe that we could insist or should insist as to how we can take this ahead. In the case of the manifesto, I had a great satisfaction as a visiting professor to create in the Advanced Studies Institute converging opinions, and the first study group tried to study in how the expectation of quantity and quality of life, and this increase was a theme, and what has been growing, only interrupted by the pandemics, which is this dialogue, deals with human life. This significance, the significance of we attribute to personal and collective life, and what is the impact of these studies. And these impacts have been very valued in the academic community of Brazil. The times I've participated in discussions as to the life expectation in terms of years, the result is we have to contribute more time to social services. Oh, it's a secondary discussion that escapes the productivity, but it's what's sold by the media, and facing which it would be important for us to develop a bit more. What is this expansion of a lifetime and quality of life? I think these are important studies to take ahead in our cooperation. And to finish, I say that we have to take into consideration the social demands and our social collaborations to attend to deficits and lacks in society. In the Brazilian case, there are many of those. And then understand the superhabits and the advancement of projects and the proposals, the opening of a future that is wider and wider, and very significant also. I believe that that's the way I would see this cooperation between university and society. Thank you for your attention, and I hand over the floor to Helena Nader, who's the president of the Brazilian Society for the Progress of Science, a great scientist, professor from UFBA, and several other things that I do not come to my mind right now. Thank you for your presence. Thank you, Professor Renato. Dear Renato, your interventions are always important. Thank you for your initial interventions. I want to give a good afternoon to all. It is a pleasure to be here. And also, I want to remind you of my experience in IEA, in the Institute of Art, Culture, and Science, where I had the privilege of working with a great human being, besides Martin, of course, and Viviana, but a great pleasure to work with them. It's an honor for me to be here. And I want initially, maybe it's not the moment, but we cannot. In each moment, we have to remind ourselves of all the Brazilians, men and women, who, from the last data, there is more than 421,000 Brazilians who have lost their lives due to COVID-19. This is something that we have to remind ourselves of, especially in this discussion, in other words, the role of the university. And I want to thank very much to Martin for having brought this exhibition by Antoni Muntadas to Brazil. I will not have any slides to show. We might have images after the images and texts I've shown. I was even thinking, where am I? What am I going to be able to say that hasn't been thought of, or said, talked about? I saw the exhibition several times, in fact, because I saw it from the first students, then the talk of the teachers, and the text that was rolling down. And the timing for this, or the moment to bring this exhibition to Brazil, and I was talking about that before we began, is a perfect time. We are now going through, it's not only the greatest sanitary crisis, it's the greatest social crisis of the country. The sanitary aspect is coming together with the rest of things. And what is the role of the university, the academy and the university? What is the concept? Those who saw his exhibition saw that the same thing is being talked about.
Nuances distintas.
But
então, isso
different
debate
tones.
que a universidade brasileira.
This is a debate that the Brazilian university really needs to have. And as the greatest part of the science, I'm not saying it's the only one, but the greatest part of science is paid by public institution. And I see that the Brazilian public university owes to itself a self-criticism. It has to have a debate, as well was pointed out by our education minister, Minister of Education, Juninho. He said the university serves society, and society serves the university, of course. And what is the role that we have to perform nowadays?
E como bem colocou Muntadas no início da
As Muntadas said in the beginning of this discussion, the North American model, I could use a little more. I don't know if it's it's valid for the whole of the United States, because there are several United States of America. There's the Harvard United States, the Yale, the Ivy League, and there are the colleges of America, which are going on with the hand labor of this people, the North Americans. They make the technologists. So the university, each university has its own project, but that project should be aligned to have the view of the product, but the product in the best sense of it. Why are we there at university? I'm a scientist. I love doing science. But what about the training of human resources? Whom are we serving when we train people? How can I make a university that has more dialogue with society? It's not simple. I won't come in with the North American model. I'll look inside Brazil. We have the agenda, and it fits all the debates of Muntadas, right, in his exhibition. We have, and Brazil is a signing member, with an aggressive role in the 2030 agenda, the 17 objectives of sustainable development. Now, how much have our universities dedicated themselves to the sustainable development goals? Individually, professors, groups may be aligned, but the university as a whole, no way. Maybe I'm wrong. And if we, in between inverted commas, who are considered an elite of the thought, are not aligned with society, how do we expect this alignment to happen? I'm just giving you some examples. So you can see that there are universities that want to change. Nevertheless, within this context, this world context of the evaluation, universities keep more of the same because they want to be part of the ranking. The ranking that should be a consequence of something becomes the goal in itself.
Eu acho muito complicado.
So it's like the means and the goal are the same thing. So it's complicated. How do you reach equity when you say that things have
E muitas vezes alguém é muito bom, é o primeiro num aspecto.
Sometimes maybe you're the first in one aspect, but you're not in the other aspects. And so the world is also thinking of other forms of evaluation, but that is very much concerning as to how or where are we treading towards within a university that is plural. And then Brazil, Renato has already brought this up.
Eu acho que saímos bem.
I believe that we have departed well in inclusion. I don't like the name quota for Afro-descendants in Brazil. Affirmative actions, affirmatives to repair, that's what we're doing. Yes, but we stopped. We stopped, and we do not want to acknowledge that we stopped. The Minister of Education has to look at that. I know that's not the point right here, but within the university that MEC serves, the ministry serves, talking only about permanence and admittance. You have to ensure that the educational good was put forth, and permanence is not happening. Equality is not happening in Brazil. Equality of access. When you see remote classes being given and the difficulty of students to have access, not everybody has wideband internet. And when you try to give them wideband, there are discourses saying that there is no need for that. So I see this exhibition as something that is extremely beautiful. I practically devoured it. Perhaps I have to be a bit, take it slowly and watch it in parts and let it drench me, because there is information. In fact, in the texts that go along, that are fundamental. So it is fundamental for us to think of university. There's no formula, a single formula for a country. There's no single formula for anything. In fact, each one has its own characteristic. Nevertheless, I'll give you an example. Regarding Naomar, Professor Naomar, he was a rector for the Federal University of Bahia. He's a physician and he's a professor. Before that, he was a doctor, yes. And he's a great researcher in the medical area. And Naomar made a revolution in the Federal University of Bahia with the creation of the graduation degrees in the new campus, which was like 700 kilometers away from the capital. That was breaking up the structures. You don't get into the university to go into engineering, medicine, or you come in to become a citizen, and then you choose your profession. You'll have a formation before you choose your profession. That decayed a little. When you finish, that's when the process finishes. He created this University of the South of Bahia, which I know in detail. It's another marvel with another focus. What you put forth, Renato, and about the stakeholders, society was part.
Então, eram os indígenas, os quilombolas, todos. Aquele é um modelo para a Federal do Sul da Bahia. Talvez possa ser aplicado em outras com uma sociedade igual. Mas também a gente não forma aqueles que vão ser os professores para serem diferentes de nós. Então, isso é uma crítica que eu faço à nossa universidade. A gente tem que romper barreiras. E isso, o debate...
We have to break barriers. And this is something that Muntadas addresses many times.
A pesquisa, a extensão.
Research, extension. Here in Brazil, we divided these things a lot. And then people want professors to be the most polyvalent, rational human being. They have to be good in didactic research, extension courses, in management. They might try to be good at all of these things, but now demanding teachers to be good in this, in all these fields is also something that kills their curiosity, not respecting university as a whole. Anísio Teixeira, founder of SBPC, along with Mauricio Rossi Silva, he was the president of SBPC. He created CAPES, which is 70 years old this year. He makes it very clear. He says that university is not a place to accumulate knowledge, but to create knowledge. And create knowledge, from my point of view, is not a specific type of knowledge. I don't think there's only one alternative. We have to be able to do things based on the point of view of others. University in Brazil especially has a social role, and Latin American universities as well, because it's not Brazil is not the only country who has indigenous people, who has African people from African origins. Brazil isn't the only country that segregates in Latin America. Of course, we are trying to revert this situation, but we have to focus much more on this. Now, I'm going to go to my final remarks. There's another important aspect of public universities in comparison to the so-called public universities in the USA is that public in Brazil is seen as something free of charge, and public in the USA is understood as something that is being evaluated by the state. It's not free of charge. Of course, I don't want to have in Brazil a model that is just like the same as the US, but we have to address the university from a broader point of view, because there is public investment and we have to return things that are clear to university, and we are not making it clear. Last weekend, I received a piece of information, a research study that shocked me. I'm going to double check the research study, but it was talking about the number of Brazilians who think that the earth is planned, that vaccines kill, that SARS-CoV-2 virus was manipulated in a laboratory. It's impressive. The figures are impressive. They show how there is a hole between our dialogue. Because I don't think the university is the only point, the main important thing. I think the university comes from college, from lower degrees of education, but we as university have an even greater role of knowing to have dialogue with the public. So now I am going to finish. It's been 15 minutes so that all the others can have time to speak. And I'd like to say that it was an honor and privilege. And I would like to thank Martin, the privilege of being able to be here and to stop and think about something that is really important for me. What am I useful for? Muntadas asked me, what is the role of this university you belong to, the research study that you conducted? Have you ever stopped to think about it? And I'll tell you what, it really questioned me, Antoni. Muntadas, you really touched me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Elena. I've sent you a link of the article you read. 20% of people who think the Earth is planned, and 50% of people who think that hospitals are paid to advertise wrong information. So we still don't have the source of this research study. I would like to emphasize something that Professor Elena mentioned, that it is extremely focused with our discussion. Public university cannot be understood only a free of charge university. It has to be committed to the public with its ethics. So, ethics, and we are speaking Greek, aren't we, Elena? You should teach us. Thank you. But this is an important aspect. We are discussing the very meaning of what is public. Public cannot be understood as a space in which people who, young people who studied in private schools join, and then they leave to the labor market and keep making money. The university is not remain being public if it is only for the wealthier people. Of course, there were quotas, and this made available other people. This enabled other people to join the university apart from those who are wealthier. But the students also have to be taught how to commit with the public sphere, and this has to be done by professors, educators, and students. So thank you very much, Elena, for your contribution. Now I would like to pass the floor to Professor Naomar Almeida Filho. He made a remarkable work at the Federal University of Bahia, and then he expanded this project to the south of Bahia. And he is one of the major thinkers of Brazilian universities nowadays. The work that Naomar performed in Bahia and the work performed in the University of ABC, and then we have also what was done in the Federal University of São Paulo. It also expanded a lot. So we saw remarkable results, and now I would like to pass the floor to Professor Naomar. Thank you very much, Renato and Elena, for your words. Both of you are people who inspire us. I am going to start sharing my screen with you, and I was inspired by a visit to an exhibition. The exhibition brought a visual impact, but also an impact that relates all of the topics that we are discussing today. So we are discussing about the possible futures for universities in Latin America. Of course, there are assumptions, and these assumptions are related to a specific future. I'm not going to go into this future in detail, but I'm going to highlight the fact that we need to think about this. But this assumption relates to the fact that education is a political right. Education has to be an ability to build and conquer other rights. So the academia has a mission that is related with an integral training of subjects. Higher education isn't university education. The institution called university, which is this interrelation that Antoni Muntadas talks about, has possible unfoldings. There are many possibilities that open up agendas for discussion. And the agenda is not only specific for higher education, but for education as a whole. And this agenda tries to recognize knowledge in a more specific way as an asset. The word asset in Portuguese isn't very good because it's very closely related to investments in Portuguese, but it's almost as a reference to centrality in this world in which we live. There's a discussion that is important to be carried out, which is related with the general training. Going back to general training, there are topics that in the past, for example, in medieval universities, acquired expressions that are famous, trivium, quadrivium, and I kind of made a joke here with the Pentavian. Now I'm mentioning Rome and the influence of Latin thinking. So we need linguistic competent domain of at least one lingua franca. We have to have training for research, and we have to think of research in its broader meaning, research and creation. I would include pedagogic competence, skills. I think that all of us have to develop skills to share knowledge, and pedagogic skill and competence is exactly this. It is not a product or an asset that was made private. I'm talking about technological and critical technology, something that understands well the reason for being. And I'm also talking about the social aspect that is closely related with the human being. Now, there are terminologies that are appearing in this referential, this possible reference. Something that can be applied. Chinese universities are calling themselves as university sources, something that is more collective instead of being individualized. So this eco-social sensibility can be unfolded in possible 5 ways. And Elena mentioned something that we have been discussing a lot, but that hasn't repercuted in universities. We need an effective engagement with the systems that are related to the world. Maybe we will have to think Nago or Chomsky or Latin or Greek. Maybe we have to use the Yoruba language. So these complete an infographic that summarizes my introduction. And now all the topics that were brought here today about what we call general education, liberal arts in American universities, they think based on this image of the Owl of Athens as a reference of knowledge. Now I'm going to start talking about the possible futures. How can we address this issue? Or at least how we can try to formulate it as a question. Of course, we are gonna use important and famous authors in the Western world. Edgar Morin, Italo Calvino. This is just a joke. So let me go back to Italo Calvino. Just 1 second, let me go back in my slides. Italo Calvino talks about 6 lessons. I am sorry, I got lost with my slides. The machine took control of the presentation. So, Italo Calvino talks about 6 memos. Edgar Morin mentions 7 reforms or knowledges. And then we advance to a discussion about machines. What I can say is that talking and the dialogue with those intellectuals has a sphere that does not necessarily need or demands us to use them as references. We would start from a point of view that is trying to be independent. It can be independent or confluent with a point of view of transformation of society. And then there's an entire discussion about in what direction are we going to change society. There are possible directions. Are we going to focus on a set of information that creates a binarism between global and local, something that is treated metaphorically, and that in its base has this huge poverty. And this is a question that can be translated into this dialogue that we are trying to perform. So I think that this agenda for the university from the point of view of intellectual construction, construction of academic formulas, there are authors that are fashionable. One of them opens up way. It is a way that discusses university. Pierre Bourdieu, he focuses his work on universities. There's another French thinker who is contemporary from Bourdieu, who died before him, Michel Foucault. And both of them are being used again, but they're being read according to re-evaluations. There are some people who are trying to translate Foucault. There's this other Korean thinker, Yoon Shin Han. He is discussing violence, something that constitutes society. You know that I have an affinity with Boaventura de Souza Santos. Boaventura deals with this issue that includes the discussion of the centrality of university from the point of view, from the Eurocentric point of view, from the colonized point of view. Of course, that from the historical point of view, we can't ignore the fact that it is part of Western culture. University belongs to this reference. It has its origins there. So when we think of the historical aspects, the historical past, the university that is structured us as intellectuals, there is this search of trying to reconstruct, rebuild in our reality what was a project in other realities. So the topic that we have been discussing of specificity of contexts have to be included to our discussions. Boaventura, he questions the epistemologic privilege. And then there is a discussion of another topic that he problematizes, which is epistemol diversity. If we are going to respect, and then there's a discussion of including subjects. Is the inclusion of subjects imply in opening up university to society? Does this include only individuals, subjects? But what about their points of view, their knowledges, their cultural matrices? And universities are going to be able to turn into a powerful place of subject gathering. And at the current situation, I would include these two institutions that have been working for inclusion and being successful for years. But there's also a question related to the fact that questions the fact of including people, subjects. And then Luis Carlos de Menezes comes to my mind. We have to include, to respect, to welcome, and to recognize this diversity. Maybe we have to have a relationship that is more sensitive, that has more affection. So maybe we would not talk about universities, about the exotic and different. Then we have another point of view related with an radical innovation in the way of Renato saying that Naomar has 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to stop in 4 minutes. No problems. So this ecology of knowledge has to be better understood and explored in university, because then it's going to be able to create and recreate. Universities are extremely conservative. They have a background of traditionalism. Universities have to become more active, faster, more changeable, and more sustainable. It has to respect differences and be more sensitive. And then we have the reference of the Nagel thinking. It wasn't only a reference. It wasn't only a bibliographic reference, but also an intellectual reference. Muniz Sodré talks about thinking Nago. He evolves when he talks about institutional culture. And I would like to wrap up with a sentence of another thinker, another personality from Bahia. And he talks about what's new. I prefer to use what's new than what is innovative due to a meaning point of view. Milton Santos had a relationship of great conflict with the institutions that were submissive when he was constituted, politically speaking. He talks about universities from a point of view that I would say that contains a fair complaint. Those institutions are inert and conservative. Those institutions resist what's new. And what he asks is why there's so much resistance to what's new. Why what's new generates so much fear. Connection to old ideas is like an illness. It is a symptom. There's an issue with institutions who use this reference. This topic is very difficult for us. It's very complex to change and perpetrate change within universities. Universities are not used to changing. We do have new curriculum and so on and so forth, but the institutional culture is much more difficult to deal with, and they are much more challenging when it comes to discussing the role of universities nowadays. I am trying to understand this transnational or transcontinental initiative from Muntadas from this point of view. So we are going to be able to talk a little bit further in the round table.
Thank you,
later on. Thank you very much, Naomar. I would like to congratulate you.
I don't use
when you talked about
because it reduces our ability.
I don't like the word competence. I prefer the word skill. And if you may allow me, I would like to suggest the slide in which you detail eco-social sensitivity, the slide number 8. I think you could strengthen social inequality that appears as empathy and something that is related with egocentrism. I think this should be stronger because we are not talking about overcoming a psychological problem. Egocentrism is a fundamental and central trait of capitalism, especially of the capitalism, the delayed capitalism in which we live. So maybe you should give a little more focus on this because it's extremely important, if you may. So this is my suggestion. Now I would like to invite Professor Guilherme Wisnicki.
Obrigado, Renato. Muito obrigado também ao Martin Grossman e ao IEA pelo convite. Um grande prazer estar aqui também na companhia da Helena e do Naomar.
Great pleasure to be here with Naomar also, with whom I've heard their contributions, forming a great plural positions, challenging positions put forth by Antoni Muntadas, an artist that I've admired for a long time, and therefore I begin now telling him that I am a vehicle of the transmission of a hug by Paulo Santoro and other teachers that have been a friend of his since cities which he participated in. Well, as was well put here, this exhibition, there is a space, a virtual space that is very polyphonic, created by Muntadas, who recently inaugurated here in São Paulo, even though it's a virtual thing. It puts this Socratic parliament for our imaginations. It's an exhibition that is essentially a dialogue based on the verb and the oral argument. It's a great polyphonic of voices that are very interesting, dealing with themes that are very interesting themes. Muntadas is an artist that brings Quintina friends, where he has a number of panels with interviews, which he does with people from very different origins. The faculties that the faculty that he consults are part of those voices that composes a mosaic of reflection, which deep inside is a reflection of the intelligentsia of the world, several countries, in fact. Another fundamental aspect of Muntadas as an artist is his capacity of translating. On translation, for example, is a persistent work which he does, which operates translations between idioms, cultures, medias, cultures, because Muntadas is an artist of the medias, an artist that incorporates technology as a crucial thing that is fundamental. Or language. I would like to say that this exhibition here is a great incentive to our imagination about the place in the case, focusing the place of the role of the university in our university. And he brings up, as a very provocative way, as he always does in his work as an artist, he also brings the questioning of a certain North American ideology as being the center of the world, or being the physical, symbolic place for the broadcasting of concepts that pretend to be or intend to be universal. But it doesn't serve to several of the contexts of several countries, cities, and cultures, which are different. As Elena said, maybe it doesn't even serve the United States as a whole. In these talks, in these exhibitions, issues touch me very internally on the dichotomies of the dichotomic feature, the dichotomic apparel that doesn't have the intention of being a dualist or a reducing instrument, but it brings to light some divergences that are many times complementary. For example, between university and academy, or between public and private. And I was saying that these themes about the public and private, for example, are very internally touching me in a number of reflections that I have gone through in the criticism of architecture, and especially urbanism in the cities, but also the themes of the the facilities of the North American universities that are great conglomerates of real estate. And you can think of that in the Brazilian space too, space and architecture, for example. So my talk goes into architecture mostly, which is my angle. I will share my presentation. Let's see if it's centered for you about academia. So I begin, Martin told me in the morning there was a shown of FAO, University, the School of Architecture of São Paulo, São Paulo University. This is a very well-known photograph because it potentializes the space of the School of Architecture and Urbanism as a political forum. This space that is different from a panoptic, because a panoptic is a space for control from a center. Now this is an empty center to which everything turns, and it has the library as the great space. Really, this space to the left with the open windows or the slanted windows are the library of the university. In this school, the library opens to the outside and opens to the Caramelo Salon, to the Caramelo. And this is then the very beautiful image of that school, where I had the pleasure of studying, and now I have the pleasure of being a teacher there, because in it, there's a whole floor. It's called the museum floor, is the floor that belongs to the students. There, the students can make the interventions they might find better to do. It's a free property or free appropriation space. It was made by the students, in which hammocks were installed in mobile structures that permitted this space, which is an important connection space in a university, would be also a space for resting, leisure, or meetings. Opening again, well, one of the topics of the interviews made by Muntadas are spaces. And this is the point I want to talk about, because we're trying to talk about an optics that is a vision that is to the southern hemisphere, especially the São Paulo experience and the building of the School of Architecture projected in the 60s incorporates an ideology in which the form is very important, possibly a weakness that became a strength, a singularity that distinguishes Latin America or Brazilian society as one center, but shows the singularity as a potency. The ideology emanating from it is a very present-day way of thinking nowadays. I like to relate this image, which is a spontaneous image created by the students in University of São Paulo, with the Brazilian pavilion in the Bienal, where Lúcio Costa designed, to choose Brazil, a space with hammocks and guitars that were available for people to lay down on the hammocks. And the network is the presence of indigenous architecture, maybe not architecture, but furniture, or a symbol of indigenous. And this presence of an airspace that that hovers above, it is a very cordial thing, not in the sense of the violence of Sérgio Buarque's point of view, but a generous point of view. This is also very important for us. It significantly happened After our colleague Renato Giannini was a Minister of Education, in the project for school reorganization. And in the state of São Paulo, there was a reaction that was very strong on the part of the secondary students that somehow took a very strong politicization of civil society because of, even though there was a serious Brazilian crisis at that time, there was the resistance to that policy that was being implemented as established before that would reduce what was remaining of the public education, obeying to the performance and finance that does not consider a public good, a public asset. At the same time, as this secondary students resistant, a number of protests were made for the city, not only as a space to live in and circulate in, but also a place of collective rights for citizenship. Perhaps I would get to the second part of my talk that points out to its conclusion. I would like to say there are modern architecture that is inaugurated by this facility in Rio de Janeiro with a consultantship by Lúcio Costa, Niemeyer, and it is an architecture that builds public space. The great distinction in this building is this square upon pillars that crosses a whole block in a city that used the quarters, the blocks to make a rock kind of building to live in and to work in. Lúcio Costa studied in Mackenzie in the 50s, Mackenzie University, and he talked about what was learned. And he gives here a definition that is interesting to read about. The information that we received in the schools was very distant from the practical demands. It was an academic knowledge or teaching. There was an effort of self-teaching taken from Artigas Niemeyer, Darcílio Correia Lima, Francisco Borlonha, Rede, works that were impregnated with dense poetic and popular message turned to the urban, the public building, and more ample solutions where the social life and a vocation of a new way to live were delineated. And the most important, an architecture that reflected the view of the university, a vision of the university, especially because of its urbanistic meaning. Wide spaces destined to crowds, an architecture that decisively oriented itself to a new society, having in place a world that was opening, a building that builds the city. This idea of wide spaces turned to crowds, and the vocation for the urban, which Paulo talks about, identifies a vision of the university. This is what hosts the occupation of that very place, for example, in this way, which I like a lot, which is a ball in the street carnival in Rio de Janeiro that happens in the pillars, within the pillars of the Ministry of Education. Uses such as this, or as this famous show of Daniela Mercury Singer in the wide spaces of the Museum of Modern Art in the Paulista Avenue, but not in political manifestations where this wide space becomes an infinite sea of people, a paradigm of our public space. I'll skip here because I won't be able to talk about Hélio e Tizica. But what I wanted to finish with here, coming back to the School of Architecture building, it is a building that teaches. At the same time, he hosts teaching, and the architecture itself teaches. It teaches what? It teaches these values, which is the values of the living together, living with the differences, living with the respect for the limitations of, for the limits, the borders of the other person. This is an image of the work offices They're all integrated. Walls don't go up to the ceiling. And Villanova Artigas, the author of the projects, when he writes his memorial just before the building, he makes a definition that I find very interesting and very beautiful. And I will read it with you. He says, it is a school of simple finishings, modest as is interesting for an architect school, which is also a laboratory for essays and for rehearsals. The generosity of the space increases the degree of living together, of meetings and communication. If you shout in the building, you will interfere in the whole environment. So the individual is taught. She organizes and gains a spirit of a team. He says he urbanizes himself, which is parallel or at the side of the he is instructed. So if he shouts, everybody will listen. So the freedom of everybody is given a guide by the liberty of the others. You can't hide in a closed room within four walls in the silks of agoraphobia, as science and poverty is talked about in literature. Within this bourgeois fetish of being closed in your cave, in the School of Architecture, you live with everybody. The student instructs himself and also urbanizes himself. This is one of the important parameters that we may use to think of a spatial concept of public university in the global south in today's situations. Thank you, Guilherme. I would like to point out that because of your education, you dealt with a theme that none other has raised as to Muntadas' work, which is the articulation of the physical space according to the academic facilities. By my deficiency, I couldn't be able to deal with that, and my colleagues haven't either. I would like to bring up Professor Milton Santos' points of view. He was from Bahia. He was from University of São Paulo. He was very much enhanced. And I read a talk by Milton Santos where he complemented urban life. So go into the city that emancipates people, not in the famous medieval, that the town makes the man a free person. Maybe he was thinking of that. I was thinking about the urbanization, the urban world, that gives us more liberty, because we can associate as to what Marx said about the peasant as a mode of production in the field, makes people become isolated and segmented. And when you begin to have a collective work, in the case of Marx, a collective life, in the case of your exhibition and in the talks of Milton Santos, you begin to have more freedom, more common space. It is a point for association among the several ideas that were raised. And there is already a question by the public, and I go to the question, which is directed to Naomar. It comes from Antoni José Cardoso, and the question is how to make it compatible for the criteria of validity of the several knowledges that have to be included in the university, so that the university may be inclusive in the wider sense that you talked about. Can you answer to that question, Naomar? Yes, well, it's a very difficult question. Would you like me to repeat? No, it's not because of your words. It is because it is a difficult question. University never discussed criteria of validity of their knowledges. There is a reference from the historical point of view that translates the ways in which the science self-manages itself as to the ways the university makes its own self-reference. And the history of the university, there was the invention, which was, at a certain point of history, that little turn, of Illuminism, which Renato knows very well because he's written about that.
o que se chama de liberdade de cátedra.
What is called the freedom of a university chair, freedom of a university chair for an autonomy that is an autonomy of itself, and not the autonomy referred to the context that hosts the institution. That's why universities are very much similar to one to another, and not similar to the society in which they are inserted in.
É muito difícil.
Or the territory it's inserted in. It's very difficult. If the university does not have a dialogue with society, then there will be this lack of knowledge, a lack of knowledge that will continue, and will have a difficulty to understand why certain chronologies are more permanent than the ideologies that orient us. I'll hand over the floor to Ari, also known as Guilherme. I'll hand over to Ari and tell him that, have you followed since the beginning by YouTube? Yes, but he has been in the room for a while. Ari, please. Good afternoon, Renato, for your kindness.
Embora seja momento festivo,
even though it is a festive moment, I can't help following the line of dear Elena, and besides endorsing the respect to the 421,000 questions that have died, I would like to bring a person specifically whom has died a month ago, and we commemorated on Friday, which is Professor Alberto Bozzi.
De múltiplas facetas, né?
Is a person of multiple facets. He's an academic, he's combative, and was director of IEA, consultant for IEA,
principalmente foi ícone de tantas gerações.
But he was an icon for several generations, and I believe that he represents the spirit that permeates this debate. Naomar, in his, as always, his very interesting presentation, he makes a reference to the owl as a symbol of knowledge. And I would like to bring 2 or 3 aspects of the owl.
Acho que também fazem parte dessa nossa conversa.
Make part of our conversation here. One of them, which is a characteristic of the owl, it's the night prowler, and we end up being night owls too, or night beings too, to be able to do everything we have to do, some complicated things. But the other 2 characteristics of the owl are important to me. Maybe one of them, just to take that, which is the fact that some species, some kinds of owl, are preying animals. And this concern from Renato in the opening, when he calls the attention to us about the university community in Brazil and in other countries, we have people who do things they shouldn't. But I would like to say it's not a privilege of the university. I think that any institution, we will see that, not only in universities. And if the examples that were very disagreeable,
Renato nos trouxe, eles são preocupantes.
They are concerning. Yes, I would like to say that in other contexts, universities have been much more cruel, not only in Brazil during the period from 1964 to 1985, but also during the military government, but also because of family origins in German and Italian universities, for example. The Jewish teachers were boycotted from the beginning, and part of the boycotters were people at the level of Reichenstein and others. So we have this issue of having lights and shadows. And finally, Renato, I'm not here to make a speech, but I would just like to mention two brief references to the presentation, the splendid exhibition by Muntadas. One of them I could mention to him in the first of the roundtables that Martin organized. Martin is fantastic for creating dialogue environments, environments that can be, building blocks for the confrontation of ideas. But in fact, in the presentation, in the conclusions, there is a certain need, perhaps, to look at other university worlds. For example, when he puts the contraposition between institution and corporation. If this is valid in the North American university, I believe that in Brazilian university, the valid contraposition is not institution and corporation, but institution and bureaucratic organization that becomes hardened, paralyzed, and leaves out its perseverance. And I believe that one question that I leave to you, I'm always very much touched when I hear about the opening of society, of university to society, the relationship between university and society, as if we weren't part of the society. It looks like we're an external alien being to society, and we're trying to look for channels towards the society. But I see the university as an integrating part of society. I don't know if this is just terminology or excess detailing on my part, but maybe we have another form of expressing this in a better way, this relationship that we have with other segments of society. And finally, coming back to the owl, and now using the slang about the owl. The owl in Brazil is used as someone who's very zealous about things. I am zealous, yes, and I respect you very much for being the creator of IEA and IAC. And Helena, my friend from so many adventures, and thank you for your participation in IEA as a chairholder. Together with Paulo and Naomar, visiting professor, title holder, with a vibrant chair on basic education, and also a director, extra officio, Professor Wisnik. I'm a zealous person for you, and how IEA can help you, it will, whenever it can help you. Continue with us, Antoni Muntadas. You are now part of the IEA, and once you've gotten into the family, that's where you remain with us. Thank you, Renato, for the opportunity. Thank you, Ari. Let's continue this discussion. I'd like to raise another issue. I would like to raise the issue of inequality. It is an issue that had a great participation by Helena. When Helena was in Unifesp, she took several initiatives for social inclusion. Naomar did that too in the Federal University of Bahia and in the new university that he created in the south of Bahia. I believe that Helena is always right as the term quotas, which became very denigrating, as if it was an issue of privileging a certain group. Let me remind you that in Brazil, there's a great lie and a great mistake about quotas. I was in the ministry, I talked with Helena and with another person that was very illustrious in the scientific community that it couldn't even tell me how it worked in federal universities. Thinking, or the discourse that the media happened because of racial, ethnic quotas. It's very common to see people, you can't have racial discrimination. It can only be social. But the federal law is very clear. Half of the vacancies are for those who come out of public schools, which is exactly the social sense of inclusion, right? The ethnic is a subgroup raised in each state, given the percentile of the ethnic aspects, Afro-descendant or indigenous descendant, in that unit of the federation. In Bahia, there will be more Afro-descendants than in Rio Grande do Sul, and the Amazon more indigenous compared to the states that we are in now, the southern states. There is a lie. There is a mistake by some and a lie by those who divulge data that should, by their profession, sometimes journalists or reporters and teachers, so say you should be informed. And at the same time, this inclusion is a very important aspect because it has permitted to reveal talents. So people who did not have capacity or possibility to develop their own gifts, their virtues, started to have this opportunity. There are Mozarts that are assassinated, as Saint-Exupéry talked about the night flight in a trip on a train during the Second World War, and sees children, hungry children, undernourished, with no care, and how many geniuses are being assassinated, how many Mozarts are being assassinated. And it seems very particularly important that Brazilian society is a specialist in assassinating Mozarts. One of the main characteristics of this society. It is a society that has promoted killing of people. We know that in slums like Jacarezinho, we don't know really how many talents, how many capacities are being assassinated. Well, I believe that this is an important point. And I want to add to what Ari said, to an issue that if it is true that the university is good as compared to other entities belonging to society, the university, on the other hand, has an ethical demand that is more elevated. I expect more from a university than I might expect in a private corporation. From a private enterprise, I expect it to be good for society because it has to do and comply with the laws of the country. But I hope that the laws are made in such a way that the corporation has to perform an ethical role for the social inclusion, which should extend to other aspects of human life, not only urban, but also rural. And in the case of the public university, or non-public university, but in the public case, I say it doubtlessly, I hope it has a very clear ethic finality. We're not here only to fill in a role of instructing people for the marketplace. We're here to make research, to bring in new knowledge, and to bring new knowledge that would bring an important impact. So I would like to say that, and I will tell you, I'll make a round in the order that people can do, and then we will make a second round. Okay, I'll go to Helena, and we'll make a dialogue among us all. Okay, Helena, please. Naomar de Guilherme.
Obrigada, Renato. Obrigada, Guilherme. Quero parabenizar tanto o Naomar.
Thank you, Renato. Thank you, Guilherme.
Foram fantásticos.
You were wonderful.
Os dois brilhantes. As imagens que você trouxe, Guilherme, muito
shared with us were very beautiful.
Se todos os espaços universitários brasileiros
all of the Brazilian university spaces had the beauty of the building of the University of Architecture of São Paulo or like that. It would be fantastic if all the universities of Brazil could be located in areas like the area in which the University of São Paulo is located. When you think of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, the area where it is located and the tragic surroundings, We are a society, it's obvious, but we are not integrated within the concept of society. Society hasn't integrated us yet. People would say, only X type of people will enter USP. I would question, how come you dare say such a thing? Because I know so many people who have poor origins who entered university, but this is a collective imaginary. People, society doesn't include ourselves, doesn't include university. When I see how beautiful the campus of University of São Paulo, be it in the very city of São Paulo or in the city of Ribeirão Preto, I think that this is closely related with what people think about society. This is something that American universities have. They have the most interesting and elegant areas, the nicest areas of cities in the USA are where universities are located. So we have the Med campus in Columbia with the it's different, but in the rest of the US, the university belongs to society, and Brazil doesn't see this, and doesn't have this point of view yet. With regards to what Renato said, it's very sad, but inclusion is very far from being reached. Okay, we do have classrooms of doctors who graduated based on affirmative initiatives. My project would be to follow those students after graduation and how they impacted reality as a whole. We don't have these figures, unfortunately. In order to make some sort of planning, these figures would be necessary. So the university could have done this, but it didn't. Something that concerns me very much are projects of inclusion that aren't understood by Brazilian society nowadays. Today, 2021, I hear people saying, there was a drastic drop in the number of vacancies because an X number goes to African descendants and indigenous descendants. So there is, and then they say it's an unfair competition. So the concept of ethics has to be addressed very well within universities. So this is what I wanted to say. I would like to thank all of you for your images. I think that, Guilherme, you were not born when that image from the student movement in the past. I am old, but I used to be young. That time was incredible. Society took over spaces. This is central. Society has to occupy more and more. Occupation of spaces of, for example, the University of São Paulo has to be larger. There are areas within USP that are very beautiful. It could host concerts. It could bring more people together. When I saw Eliana's Eliana Souza Silva works with communities. She started at Maré in Rio, but she performed an incredible initiative within IEA. I think the work you're performing is fantastic. I really, really, really appreciate what you've been accomplishing and performing, and I really would like it to spread all over Brazil. And unfortunately, I see that we are reducing the number of scholarships for junior scientific initiation, which would bring children to university. They are children from high school. We are reducing the number of scholarships from BID, which is the relationship of university with middle school. We are reducing permanent aid to students. Those accomplishments took so long to be established in Brazil, and we are losing all of it. So I think that in the federal level, we are going to be able to rebuild all of that is being destructed so quickly. And then once again, society participation is central. The society hasn't realized that it is losing a university that belongs to them. Society hasn't taken control of it yet, unfortunately. Very well, Helena. An excellent comment. You fought for justice and technology and education throughout the time in which you were in SBPC. You fought so much and you defended our causes that are so important. Naomar, now the floor is yours. First of all, I would like to thank the reference to the metaphor of the owl that Ari Guilherme, our leader in IEA, brought. The classic metaphor is because owls can see in the dark. And the counterpoint is that during the day, it sees very little. And it seems that knowledge has to do with that image of the owl that has those great big eyes opened up, paying attention to everything. Maybe this is why there is this metaphor. I would like to talk about inequality. We have to understand that inequality is not something new or a discussion related to inclusion. It is one of the topics of classic liberalism. The first writings about it belong to Adam Smith. He wrote about it. The revolutionaries from the French Revolution, and even in IEA, many of you were interested in that. Those thinkers have incredible texts that we could say describe Brazil nowadays. But inequality as a sub-product of a certain means of production or the way in which society organizes itself. The inequality is structuring of this project. We could have an assumption that says that universities were created and powered in moments of reaffirming this inequality was necessary in order to create economic cycles to generate political change. This is a topic that is extremely complex. I mentioned Bourdieu. Universities produce heirs of power positions, heirs of knowledge, and heirs of economic advantage. Sometimes Brazilian university closed its eyes, and the university focused on creating professions that are imperial, and they are focused on basic education. It is a paradox. I call it Bernadette Gax, who is a member of the group to which I belong. Almost 90% of basic education public professors graduated in private schools. So no ethics is transmitted to this education. On the other hand, on private universities, most of the renowned professionals graduated from public institutions. And if we think historically, the contributions of public institutions for public education is minimal, unless we're talking about specific aspects. It's good for the bank system, for business administration, investments, because these professionals, they join state departments. So society has to be more critical. If you allow me another paradox, the university is a place that criticizes everything that is not referring to itself. And when we have an opportunity to reflect, to question ourselves, you were a witness and a protagonist, Helena. The university institution itself barred itself from being questioned. Evaristo gave a speech that was very important. Some people who were watching us said universities are so weak that we shouldn't start discussing this. And then she said, if university itself does not discuss this, there's no use. And if universities can't cope with this debate, it has no reason for being. And this reflection was important because people from outside the university, the institution, were trying to dialogue with the university. And we who belong to it have to enable it to be something that generates criticism and debates. Naomar, thank you very much. You are always criticizing and self-criticizing all the aspects related with the university are important. You were able to face those issues as a manager. It was very unfortunate that you weren't able to coordinate SISU, because you would have performed an incredible job. Because although we were facing problems back then, your contribution would have been magnificent. I was invited by Ada Pellegrini to create an experimental course on humanities. that was inspired in an existing course of molecular sciences that is very successful in USP. But this humanities course was abandoned. The professor was defeated. Nobody wanted to create a project connected to her. It was a shame because this course would have inspired other initiatives. And I would also like to add something with regards to equality and inequality. Liberalism defends equality, but an equality from the starting point, which is almost a revolution. When it was raised by Guilherme Boulos in a debate within Roda Viva, which is a TV program in Brazil, there was a gentleman who supported Bolsonaro, said that equality and inequality don't make sense because it depends on their origins. So if people are unequal among themselves, focusing on equality was something important. And this shows very well how Brazilian cities are opposed to equality. The first quota law was the Lei do Boi, I don't know, from 1968. It was voted by Costa Silva, and it reserved half of the vacancies in the universities of agronomy and med school to the sons of farmers. So landowners had the right to have half of the vacancies. And it was done because of probably those people would not be able to join university if there wasn't such a law. So it is a law that was passed in one of the most perverse times of dictatorship in Brazil, in the time in which we had AI-1. So these people are convinced that the children of the elite are not competent. So we try to avoid equality in basic education to ensure that their children have education who is better trained them to join universities. So they use affirmative initiatives on higher education. In 2013, we had 100,000 vacancies in 2013, and in 2015, 230. And they hesitate in giving half of those vacancies for people coming from public schools, because this would increase the number of people who didn't belong to quotas. So nobody lost vacancies, okay, because there were 100,000 and then 200,000 2 years later, because so nobody lost anything, because the vacancy that people could say, oh, my son lost a vacancy for the quotas, didn't exist, because the vacancies were created at the same time as the quotas. So we have to think of equality to a place where people are gonna get to. If the liberal project legitimates inequality that results from merit, diligence. The liberal project legitimates inequality based on equality of opportunities. The project that can be called socialist criticizes this liberal point of view as something utopian. We cannot distinguish the role of individuals based on production. I've heard stories in collective environments, stories that showed that people who made the environment better was a person who served coffee, and these improved productivity. As production is the result of a series of interactions, only through dissociation from reality that we are going to be able to determine each individual's role. So we have an idea of competition, which is the idea of liberal equality, and then we have another idea, which is the socialist idea. Brazil discusses both of them. So when we ask university to focus on equality and inequality, is very important and is in line with what you have always been doing. Guilherme, I don't think we are going to be able to have a second round for your explanation, so feel free to say as much as you want. Thank you very, very much, Renato. I'm not going to use all the time available. Thank you so much for being so kind. Did Fábio Weikart ask Boulos the question? It was him, wasn't him? We didn't know very well what was going to happen back then. We didn't know anything about him and what he was about to do.
Sobre o comentário da Helena, né, de fato...
Talking about what Helena mentioned, that moment of a student movement are images that I saw. I was born in 72, so I wasn't part of those movements. But on the other hand, I
certa forma disso, né?
Follow closely the reload of that movement.
Uma das razões até, não sei se são, bom, acho que sim.
One of the reasons, yes, I think it's one of the reasons
que a gente
that are part of this moral, conservative retrocess in different aspects of political, moral, behavior, religious, was the fact that in the past 10 years, besides an entire explicit policy of income distribution, well, there was an improvement in the so-called C social class. In the past 10 years, there has been a process of maturing of civil society in terms of occupation of public spaces. And then we might ask, why did this happen? Why? Surprisingly, from one day to another, population started to explicitly show that they wanted their citizenship to be respected, because this wasn't a characteristic of our citizens, of our behavior in cities until then. Brazil, as all of us know, is a country that developed as a colony, having slavery, and a country that modernized based on preserving, conserving the relationships of structural inequality. Industrialization worsened it, inequality. And I'm not saying that this is a privilege in between commas of Brazil. This created a patrimonialist society that does not understand very well the public sphere. It does not cultivate the public sphere as public, because all of the dynamics of the public spheres are cut by relationships of favor and of power. So our society has difficulties in understanding what is public and what it means to have equal rights to space. And for some reason, it's not a miracle or a mystery. Lately, in many cities of Brazil, the population has started to occupy the public space, saying, yes, we demand using the public space. And this is something that up until a while ago, our middle classes and elites just socialized in shopping malls, lived inside of their condominiums, and something changed in this logic. And in the streets of the cities, and bodies that really bother appeared throughout the city. And today we experience a very schizophrenic situation, because there has been an evolution in Brazilian cities of experiences of living in public areas at the same time that we have a moral retrocess. And it's not by chance. One is a reaction to the other, actually. So this discussion that is brought to us by Muntadas exhibition and the debates promoted by IEA, it's very important. The university is public. The public university is a place where we produce innovative knowledge, a place of research and investment. The university is the place where society criticizes itself. It's one place where society can't criticize itself, because the market doesn't do this, and politics also don't do this. It's necessary to have courage to do this. Sometimes the university is able to criticize society, but is not able to criticize itself as an institution. But the public university is a place of self-criticism of society, is a place where society can produce this type of criticism. And we understand that this is why many spheres of society don't like the university, because this criticism might be very bad for those who don't want it to exist, because this criticism reveals many things and it questions many things. This permanent exercise of questioning is central and is what drives a society. It is what makes a society become strong and powerful, because this society is not afraid from its traumas. It has nothing to hide. So I would like to congratulate this exercise of meta-criticism. What Ailton Krenak said, it criticized the elite-oriented point of view of Brazilian public universities. Although there is a project to kind of destroy public university, if university cannot cope this criticism, the university has to look for something else to do. At the same time, I want to believe that although we are experiencing a tragic moment, I could start from a sad point of view, but I want to do the opposite. We are experiencing a tragedy in Brazil, but it's going to be replaced by giving value to SUS, our public healthcare system, and the university, and all this heritage that shows, that makes us who we are. Not re-electing Donald Trump showed how disastrous the American healthcare was, and part of society realized that they no longer wanted this. So public university, public health care, this entire agreement that was signed in the Constitution of 1988, it will be given value again. It is the north that we are going to use to live. So now I would like to finish.
Muito obrigado, Renato. Seguindo o esclarecimento do Naomar, a coruja não vê muito bem de dia. No caso, eu não me considero a coruja, mas sou o coruja de vocês, então não enxergo bem de dia. Mas
the owl can't see very much during the day, so this issue reflected on what I said. I wanted to say, to give you the example of the university, which caused a lot of problem, the German university, and personalizing it into an important philosopher. I said that Wittgenstein, I wanted to see Heidegger, that became the rector of the University of Freiburg, but he escaped. And, well, in any case, during the day, the owl can't see, particularly this owl. Well, it's an interesting phrase. The bird of Minerva, being the owl, only is only seen after it takes flight. So it's after the fact that you can see what is happening. And the bird of Prometheus gives a name to an important series of the University of France of philosophy, which is the Prometheus thesis. What do we have as an idea? Prometheus, who brings the things before he brought fire to men. In this way, it permitted the coming of civilization. And there's Epimeteo, who comes afterwards. So nowadays, the word philosopher is used as a sort of a triumph thing, a medal. So whoever works with philosopher, they're not so famous. But Brazil has its philosophers. A girl of 23-year-old girl was called a philosopher in the newspaper. So a philosopher has become a very famous thing, a very prestigious title. But a philosopher is the friend of knowledge, and the wise man is the guy who owns the knowledge. But a philosopher only has a friendliness with knowledge. So a philosopher is less than a scientist. A philosopher has to have this humbleness that it's putting forth question, but is never the owner of answers. Then we get into mythology, because it's something very full of pleasure and very good. But would you like to say something, Martin?
Yes,
I believe that as we're coming to the end of this last meeting, Renato, and once more thanking everybody for their participation in this closure of this initial phase of this debate that Muntadas put forth. As well as Ari, I'm your zealous owl of you, and I'm admirer. And the battle that we're in nowadays is a very hard battle. And we see in the different talks here that we continue to be optimistical, and the time goes by, and that things are going to continue taking their way. We don't bring up a solution, but there is strengthening here. There is a very
de potência mesmo, né? Quando
potent process when the reminding of Eliana was mentioned here, periphery as a potency is a very beautiful image. It's not only beautiful, but it generates the idea as of what is on the borders of a centrality that is very much seen as a mirror, and that can really, there will be, in fact, a transformation in this participation with an effectivity at this time. The antagonism is very big, and I believe that the role that everybody talked about here, the metacritic role that Guilherme put forth and reinforced. I understand it, not defending art, but I understand that art is also in the periphery of the university, because there is a mistake in the thought of what this art would be and what would the role of art be within a structure that has, as was obviously debated in the three roundtables, a very important role in its context. And our Brazilian university would certainly like to have a Nobel Prize, but it wasn't made for that. It was made to have a dialogue with society. And even though our friend Ari Guilherme Pronsky, it says Guilherme here, yeah, it's Ari. Ari, we are, yes, from society. We belong to society, but there is this vision which Elena reminds us very well. There is the absence of belonging. Society hasn't interjected the role of university, which all here in the last two roundtables, all here see in the university this form of metacritics of itself, but the metacritics of society as itself. We have to change this sense because we have a training and a condition to do so. I remind myself of our professor Garcia Cancini, who talks about the immanence, art being a reflection not of what's beautiful, but it has that tool to reflect the beautiful, but along what we call contemporary art, art has contributed with things that I find very interesting. I mentioned three in my text on the exhibition of Muntadas, but I'll reinforce them here. The first characteristic is the site-specific. These are words in English that are hard to translate. It would be a specific site and a specific place, in fact. So not only Muntadas' exhibition that inspired us, but these debates put very clearly that we have to value and reinforce in our discourse this place, not the place of talk, but the time space of our condition as agents of reflection on a critical work that obviously has to come out of the university. So this role of metacriticism comes with this notion that we are in the place that, different from a universal university that we still carry, has its contextual relationship at different levels that you put very clearly here in your contributions. The other characteristic we may not forget is the curator's job. Curators have spread around, and the curatorship is born in the visual arts in the 1960s, with this attempt to make the discourse of art leave its specificity, which is the connoisseurs, the initial curators that were connected to the languages of art, to become a role of critical mediation, to make a mediation between the production of contemporary artists or non-contemporary, even artists of other eras,
com essa sociedade. Então, essa preocupação não só com a recepção,
the mediation between arts and society, and the inclusion of people in the equation of art, of the system of art. So this changes, and the curator has this role. Nowadays, instead of talking about an editor, we talk about a curator. These systems that control us and surveil us in the internet, they have these roles of being a curator, right? Google and so on. So there is the third characteristic, is the institutional critique. And there's another term in English, which I like a lot, is the criticism from within. Yes, criticism that is elaborated and developed in the interior of something. And that's what we're doing here, right? This critic. And that's why I defend of IEA. It is a think tank, a place where there is advocacy with Helena here, our major master here, and Renato is the minister, Naomar as a rector, to do that. And I believe, Guilherme, that perhaps you don't have this management experience, but I would like you to go forward to that. We need a new generation assuming roles of leadership and governance. Yes. Well, myself, as you, I am a curator. No, but I changed my role. Now I'm not a curator, but a culturator, a specialist in the culture and the poetry in culture. We're talking here about culture. In art, the curator was very much associated to art. So you are also a culturer, not a curator, culturer. You deal with architecture, but architecture in the urban media, let's say, and to make connections in the production. That always goes beyond specialities. You have this training in architecture, but you are able to go into transdisciplinarity with great facility, and that's a gift that you have, which we as admirer follow you always. So just to conclude, the idea of the criticism from within is a role that the Institute of Advanced Studies has always had, with Goldenberg to be an advanced post and be alert, because we don't have the weight of the faculty, but it facilitates us because we can make different knowledges meet, different mentalities meet, the capacity of hearing, of listening, makes IEA to go beyond a think tank platform and becomes an incubator. Can't forget of that role. IRE, the Institute of International Relations, also was born in the middle of the, from the IEA, but this role also to be alert as to different governments, which unfortunately we also reflect and about and have this role, which is not necessarily a policy per state, but we are the USP, so it's something that I see we could, sorry, Marco, I will have to leave right now, and yeah, I've just finished. You can continue, your conversation is excellent, but I'll probably Guilherme, Naomar, and Helena will answer to you. So please continue to manage this. I just have to say goodbye now because I have a health issue to solve. And so it's a great pleasure to be here with you, and Helena, we'll talk later. My greetings to you all.
Obrigada, Renato.
Thank you, Renato. Thank you, my dear ones. Sorry, it took me a little longer, but I believe I finished. I thought it was just important to reinforce the idea that the IEA, the Institute, has this capacity. And it is in its nature to do what we have done in these three roundtables here. So I hand over the floor to you.
Diga lá, Naomar. Eu levantei a mão digital.
I raised the digital hand, but nobody cared. So, but while you were talking, but it was to announce to you, and I believe I can do that, that myself and you are culturers or curators of a proposal that Casmini did to discuss until the end of the year the autonomy of the universities. And one of the things, Ari, that we anticipate, myself and Martin, is to try to find a format that gives us some tranquility to do that. Because the formats in which the university has surrendered itself are very quick formats that cannot overcome the situation of us being able to think. So, Martin, I am enrolled for that, okay? But as you said, as you brought about the issue of
ainda em aberto,
an issue that is still open, in fact, of these several knowledges. I believe that the theme of art as a knowledge that reacts, even though it is not in the records of the other external knowledges, you know, within the very university institution, they seek for a space for them. And I believe that we have a long and fructiferous path to make this listening to the institution itself. And when you talk about the theme of criticism and the criticism from within, the idea of this auto or self has a reference that you have to exit where you are in order to see yourself in the place. It's as if you needed an external energy to move. Perhaps intra-criticism, I know it's something very obvious. No, the criticism from within is intimate, it's internal. It is not a self-reference as if we came out and fake it as to look as if we do not belong. But no, I think this building of a more objective internality that will be more precise as to the and would be more objective could answer the issue, the only outside issue that we had.
Eu terminei pensando em falar, mas não falei.
Which I wanted to talk about, but I didn't, about the listening, which you brought by. The university has to open spaces in order to hear other voices, for it to talk about itself or the others, but to have a space for a dialogue. And in our chairs at the university, we make an effort, you know, academic meetings stopped being internal, and we always seek for external participants, and it's come out of our control. There are segments who are waving at us. They do not only want to be seen, but heard also. As to the reference that you do regarding the Institute of Advanced Studies, maybe classical serendipity, we might have found, due to a classic serendipity, maybe we found a certain subversion of the more archaic model of institutionalization of the universities, which is the chairmanship, that ends up to produce a transgression artifact. It would be a beautiful irony as we advance in this simplification that we are trying to seek. Thank you very much. Martin, I would like to agree with all your positions put forth before, especially by Ari, by Guilherme, and by Naomar. But there is a point that I see would be interesting to have a future discussion. It was raised in the Muntadas exhibition and will have to be deepened. In this case, it is a teacher who talks about her freedom regarding the research she was performing. She said that only after her tenure was she able to do exactly what she thought of. That's when she freed herself. And that is a contradiction. We here in Brazil do not have the tenure, right? You get into the university as a faculty member and you progress. So the tenure could be looked at, yes, but for such a small amount of people that couldn't be called a tenure. The productivity grant for productivity, the productivity grant by the CNPq, for example, such few people. But what I see is that there is an incoherence on the part of the system, both internal system and external system of the university. What I made mention briefly, but I think we should get deeper into it. Since I cannot change while I have the goal of being number one in the university faculty, it is much easier to confirm the way I am and ensure that I become elevated than making a big revolution. So these university rankings are there, but not to promote. It becomes commerce. And university cannot omit, look, and discuss what there is as positive and what is negative. Because nowadays there are specialized systems that I belong to the Paulista Medicine School, Federal School in São Paulo, and I remember when do you remember, Naomar, the discussion about the pre-university courses for medical residencies, the small courses for medical residents? There are courses, there are specialized artifacts that create how you want to come out of university. Do you want to come out as a science university? So the university has the obligation of discussing these things. I see that IEA has everything to be able to hold a deep discussion on this. It's obviously, we want to see in Brazil the 10 biggest universities in the world being Brazilian. Can you imagine that? But what about the impact of that for the Brazilian nation? And regarding the Nobel, we have several Nobel Prizes, Martin, several. In fact, many of them come from the University of São Paulo. One of them is Sérgio Ferreira, who was prayed in the Nobel Prize. Another one was prayed upon in the Nobel Prize. The other one is Maurício Rossi Silva. At the time when he discovered bradykinin, he was in the Biological Institute. We have Joana Doberheim from the Federal Rural University of Rio de Janeiro, who discovered the fixing of nitrogen. I'm not concerned about the Nobel Prize, really, for Brazil, no, because Brazil has given enormous contributions for science, and Brazil knows little about these contributions. I believe that that is something that we have to do, an advocacy to show who or what we have. What's his name, that young man who was the president of the Brazilian Academy of Sciences, a psychiatrist, graduated from the Federal University of Bahia, an Afro-descendant who revolutionized Brazilian psychiatry. Edgardo Moreira, precisely. Juliano Moreira, Nisi da Silveira. I'm just talking about some in psychiatry, which is now becoming so important in this pandemic. I'd really like to thank everybody.
As imagens e as falas, a
it
maneira...
really touched me. The images and the talks, the way he did it, he performed it. I imagined the version, like a Braziliana version, with some images, and that girl talking about the Yale Library, where she says, I think it's from Yale, she says that outside,
Quer dizer,
all is
a gente aqui, as nossas bibliotecas nas nossas
old, and
universidades.
inside it's all new. Here, our library are really being preyed upon. And there is this lack of appropriation on the part of society towards university. Society hasn't noticed that the university is hers, and that's our function. Congratulations, Martin. I've loved being here. I was able to contribute very little, but I definitely learned a lot with these masters that are here. Well, include yourself, Elena, of course. But we're coming to the closing, and Renato has left for a good cause. I don't know if Ari has any comments to do, or if you have anything else to put forth. Yeah, I just want to disagree with Elena that contributed very little. You enormously contributed me, precisely, among other issues. But when I questioned the position of the university and society, ex-society, as if it wasn't a part of it, you gave me an answer that I had never thought. So you've contributed with everybody, and myself particularly, and allow me to disagree with you about your little participation. Thank you for being here this afternoon with us. The audience, we don't know who the audience is really. We don't know who you are, but numbers reveal only a part of this audience. And we deeply thank you, Naomar, Guilherme, Wisnik, and Elena and Renato, for being here and magnificently contributing for this debate this afternoon. And Ari, thank you very much for your support. Ari is a director like no one else was able to be. He was present in the pact and actively participating in 3 roundtables. He participated a lot, and these were long roundtables, and we know what is demanded on your directorship and how many issues are dealt with by you simultaneously. And so it's an honor to count on you in these debates. What Muntadas wants to do is to produce another book. So I think we believe we're going to stop working, but no, there's more work ahead. And the idea is to create one more publication with all these contributions that we've had in this May, beginning with the Macaé presence, Ayrton Krenak, and this morning a roundtable, a fantastic roundtable with the presence of researchers from Japan, England, United States, and Brazil, of course, and the presence of our Erika Peçanha, who is a postdoc from IEA that supervises the project of Eliana, Democracy, Art, and Cultural Knowledges. They were all excellent in their contributions, and we had this opportunity of traveling around the world and having a notion of the issues in different contexts. Congratulations to everybody in IEA and translators who permitted us to have these dialogues, also reaching a wider public ones that we have, the 3 languages. Very good. Good afternoon, and see you again.